All right. Hello and welcome. Thanks everyone for tuning in. My name's Clyde. I'm from Sony Australia, and I'll be kind of co-hosting tonight with Andy. I'd just like to give a big thanks to Andy first for jumping on and kind of discussing his work and his career so far and a few tips and tricks, but also a big thanks to Camera House Rouse Hill for organising tonight's event. Sweet. I'll just bring Andy onto the stream now.
Hi, Clyde. How you doing?
Pretty good. How are you? How's life treating you?
Not bad, not bad. Just day by day getting through lockdown.
Yeah. So do you want to just tell us a little bit about your work, what you've been up to, and just a kind of a general introduction?
Sure. So my name's Andy Yee, and I'm a professional travel photographer. I've basically been running my own workshops for the last 4 to 5 years, and I basically specialise in all elements of travel photography. So basically everything from landscapes to cultural to wildlife, all the elements of when you travel. And basically I get an opportunity to do workshops everywhere from Japan, New Zealand, Oman, Jordan, Fiji, Cambodia. And I also do workshops on behalf of the Giving Lens, which is a humanitarian group started by Colby Brown, one of the Sony artisans in the US, who basically, have got me interested into photography back in 2014.
So that's how you started? Do you want to tell us a little bit about that, kind of the getting into it, the very beginning?
Yeah, so I was looking for an opportunity to travel to Jordan a few years ago, and I have an interest in cycling and I have an interest in photography. I was looking at both options, and essentially I ended up going on this photography trip. There was Colby Brown, Ken Kameninski, who were two Nat Geo photographers who basically were doing these workshops for the Giving Lands, and it was an amazing opportunity. I think being able to travel and photograph and just see something which I've always wanted to do, which is Petra. It just was an amazing opportunity to learn about photography and just see a part of the world which I'd always wanted to see and photograph. So from there, I basically did some travel through Cambodia, through Southeast Asia, did a fair bit of time in Japan also. So I ended up doing a lot of tourism work with the Japan Tourism Board. Did some subsequent other trips, for tourism with Jordan, Iceland, and pivoting from doing tourism work, I basically started doing my photography workshops. So that then led me to being able to schedule my year calendar a bit better, instead of basically running around constantly and living out of a suitcase. And just dropping everything, when someone says you've got to be in Thailand or you've got to be in Japan, by halfway through the week. Doing these workshops now, I can sort of plan my travel a bit easier.
I can imagine that kind of building the portfolio to make it in the travel photography industry is kind of like, you need to be a professional travel photographer in order to get the work on working for various tourism boards, but you also need to be already traveling to build the portfolio to get there in the first place. I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, is you kind of got to balance both because one supports the other.
Right. But I think also that the rise of the Instagram influencer has gotten to a point where I think advertising and tourism boards have actually realized that there is a lot more to than just these people creating these images. It's also then being able to understand and showcase the cultures at times. So in terms of like, I find it more fulfilling in what I do in terms of these workshops now, because I go to culturally interesting places where I get to photograph and show like, these elements which are a little bit off the beaten track, and then show them like, also the bits of the elements of the people and the culture, which I've built over the years of going and doing these trips and like, building these relationships. And, we anyone who's traveled knows that people are part of that journey in terms of like, making things like, those experiences memorable and enjoyable. So it's something which I'm very thankful that I do, and really do enjoy like, the challenges of organizing photography workshops, and then being able to see clients enjoying these trips, and like, because people have built up in their minds, especially also now when we can't travel, these are some of the trips of a lifetime that people want to be able to experience. And I
And then
love
also
what I
document.
do. Yeah, and
Yeah.
documenting by like, taking these amazing photos and spending an opportunity like, to be with other like-minded photographers. And when I do my workshops, usually it's with another professional photographer as well. So it's just like, it's an experience to like, not only experience something different culturally, a new country, but also like experiencing how to be creative for like, the photography as well.
I think you also had some images that you wanted to share, because I know that when you begin approaching the idea of, oh, I want to travel to this location and shoot this specific thing, there's a lot of research that actually needs to go into it before you even get to that point. A lot of people will scroll and look at images and go, I want to do this, I want to do that. And they think it's either a technical skill, or I just need to be in that location to capture the exact same thing or their own take on it. But I know from speaking to you previously, there's a lot more that goes into it.
Yeah, most certainly. The thing is, like, every image which I basically create, I want people to look at for a reason, and I don't want to waste people's time by like, looking at a photo which is ordinary. Like, the photos which I create are meant to grab attention and inspire people to either learn about like, that image, or to go and create like, their own images, if not to that level or even better. Like, I think we're always going to be on that path of learning and improving like, any of our skills along the way. So I've got a short presentation which I hope you'll run. Essentially, it's a series of photos over like, over a day, over the span of a day. The images start from before sunrise and then work their way through sunrise, some shots like, early morning, throughout the day, and then like, into the evening, and through to like, shooting astro at night. So the images might not be like breathtaking to some, but to me, every single one of these images is a moment which it's an experience of like, traveling, which is basically been memorable for one thing or another. Like, that has some of these images, like, have just blown my mind in terms of like, just sitting and waiting for a sunset and waiting for the color to pick up, and next thing you know, everything just lights up. And my type of photography, my type of photography is like, it's, if I could describe it, would be colorful and vibrant, with an attention to detail. So I like to create images which have like, lots of elements in them. Sometimes they can be complex. Sometimes some of these images are just the simplicity of like, just a tree in the snow. But then in terms of like, basically using that shape and form, and then using the color, like, at the time, is where I try and create something unique. And that's part of like, basically with teaching workshops is that I try and get an understanding of what people's expectations are. So what do they want to learn? What do they want to fine tune? Usually they don't just want to go to these locations and be left, to photograph it, the scene on their own. they're in these situations where they get to to see what myself with my experience or another professional photographer such as Colby Brown or Paul Pachugan, who I also do workshops with, and anyone can bring their creativeness to the table. And I love that collaboration when we're out in the field.
Yeah. That definitely resonates with me. I've been to Camel Rock twice to shoot Horsehead Rock, and both trips, it's like a 5-hour trip down there, and I haven't yet made it around the peninsula to Horsehead. I keep getting stuck at Camel Rock because there's so much to shoot there just on the way to the location that everyone else goes.
Yeah. It's an amazing location down there. And I did run a Sony Scenes workshop down there with Hannah Saba last year. We did part of the whole planning was that planning to know when to get around to a Horsehead in low tide and not get stuck
because
around
you do have to avoid the tides, right? It's a bit tricky.
So yeah, it was one of those situations where I have no problem with putting myself and my gear in situations where
it's a bit of a different story when it's someone else.
Exactly. So you don't want to see someone who's got $10,000 of camera gear go for a swim. So these are the things which I try and sort out before these workshops to see. Okay, so for example, that 2 days down in Bermagui that we did with the group, we knew that the first night we would shoot sunset at Camel Rock, and then the second the second time we'd go out would be before sunrise at low tide to walk around the rocks to get to
there in time.
Get to Horsehead, to Horsehead. And
yeah.
So it's one of those things in planning and preparation that if I'm going alone, the thing is I know I'm a lot more agile and I can flip and change to shoot certain things. But if you're photographing a workshop and with a group, then your priorities have to change. You have to make sure that everyone gets to the location in time to actually be able to set up their tripods and be able to to be ready for the moment when the sky lights up.
Yeah, because you never really know where you might know exactly where the sun will rise, but in the hours beforehand, you don't know where the clouds will be. You don't know whether there'll be a haze coming in, especially with kind of those coastal locations. It can be really off and on depending on where you are.
True. And that's the thing where I admire the guys who do astrophotography workshops, because there is not only just a lot of time and planning that gets involved with getting in the right place and looking in the right direction, but the weather can just totally take over and just put your plans on their ass. It's so hard to actually get something astro planned and executed. But then there'll be times when we do the Japan workshops where both the autumn and winter trips, we always go to Mount Fuji, and we do essentially Mount Fuji is surrounded by 5 lakes, and we all Mount Fuji they call the Shy Mountain, and essentially you could be directly in front of Fuji by half a kilometer and you can't see the top. And then there'll be days when I've been in Tokyo, which is 100 kilometers away, and you can see Fuji clear as a bell. The days when we go to Fuji and the thing is we can't see Fuji, it's tough. But then when you actually when the clouds do come through and you do basically get that clear view of Fuji and it's reflecting off a lake, or you have the tea tree plantations in your foreground and you can get all the elements together and they work, it makes it so much more enjoyable when you know that you've worked for it and it actually has come together.
So when you're planning these longer trips, time of day must be a huge factor, because if you're planning a holiday but you also have the intention to shoot, you would want to be choosing specific places to be at specific times of the day. How do you plan that?
Absolutely. So I constantly have this conversation with people who don't realize
Just want to
there's a
shoot
difference
golden
between.
hour.
Yeah, well, they go on these trips with their their wife, and they promise husband or wife, and they promise these sort of Kentucky or these general sort of tourism trips, and then they bring all this camera they take their camera gear on these Kentucky trips, and then they realize, hang on, I'm doing all these touristy things, I'm not getting a time to go off and photograph like I should be. And part of basically these photography workshops that I do is that we always give people itineraries, which are basically get up, photograph something for sunrise, photograph for a majority of the day, move from point A to point B, and then photograph something for sunset, and then doing usually in a sort of a review or editing skills or tutorials in the evening if we can. Along the way, we do some of the cultural things, we might go to see a tea ceremony, or we might go visit some temples and shrines. But the part of basically my job of doing these workshops is to make sure that people understanding what people want, and then giving them what they want in terms of photography workshop. And I always make a point that there's always at least 2 professional photographers on the trip, leading the trip. So even if someone doesn't necessarily dig my style of photography, they've got someone else who they basically can look at. And in terms of sort of tech, in terms of technical advice, or there's always someone else there, either to say, well, I would do it this way or that way, or you would agree that this is the way you would actually do it. With photography, there's never really just one way of doing something. There's always going to be different ways, and how you create with that is totally up to you. I don't tell people basically to copy the way that I do things. I'm just there to basically show them what the potential is, and what they can do on their own.
I think the hardest part that I can imagine would be the struggle of running or even going on a trip like this yourself, is kind of the change in pace. Like if you're shooting a sunrise at a waterfall in Iceland, you might want to take an hour in the one location to get the one shot. But then, like you said, if you're in the streets of Tokyo trying to shoot Fuji, you might have a split second when the cloud parts, and then that's it.
I agree. And the thing is that, so I did come from a background in terms of landscape photography mainly, but then in terms of having to do these travel editorials and tourism work, I then had to get comfortable shooting festivals and architecture, and and basically city and street, which is something now which a few years ago I won the Sony Alpha Landscape Award, but now these days I'm more known to be one of the streetscape and city judges. So I find I am a jack of all trades in terms of my photography. It is a different temperament to be a landscape photographer as opposed to photographing festivals like music festivals and cultural festivals, to photographing wildlife.
It's very different.
I look at some of the guys who do bird photography seriously, and who can sit for hours in camouflage gear in the middle of nowhere, freezing to death, and getting these images of birds out in the wild. I also get basically I'm more than comfortable to sit for hours on end waiting for sunrise or sunset to happen. And just especially with photography groups, there's always good banter to be had out in the field. It's not for everyone. It is a different change of pace, but I think I think it prepares people for these workshops, because there are lessons I've learned in landscape photography that I've then used in street or people photography. One of the photos which as part of the presentation which we'll run is shot from over the top of the marketplace in Oman, with a lot. It's the only people in this marketplace are men, and they're all wearing white gowns. And
I know the image.
So that image, basically, I was looking at it and I'm thinking, well, I'd like to do like do a slow shutter speed, and that would using like a filter and like a slow shutter speed with like in a marketplace is something that you don't really do every
Unexpected.
day.
Yeah.
I think there's just like lessons I learned in all the different genres of photography, which then I've then created my own style, which I think if anyone is looking to actually uh, develop their own portfolio, that is basically the key to it is just create your own style and be consistent with it.
Yeah. Do we want to jump into that that video now, Andy?
Sure. Yep.
Yeah, I might just bring that up. Yeah, I'm just trying to see if I can get it to work now.
Okay.
That's all right. Yeah, it's it doesn't want to play it when it's not in a PowerPoint. Do you have it there as well, Andy? That's right. It plays on my computer, but the streamer's just not bringing it up. I'll just add it into my PowerPoint really quickly. That's probably faster. Apologies. I'm just waiting to try and get this to work. That's all. It played fine earlier. Do you have your presentation or just that video? Sorry.
No, I have both. I can just
if you just share the screen, you can just jump into the PDF, and I'll get the video to work in the background while you do that. Yeah, that might just be easier to do.
Okay. So you want me to show the?
Yeah, just share screen, and that'll be probably the easiest way to do it.
Okay. Can you see that?
Yep, there we go. And then, yeah, if you just get rid of the tab that's open. Yep, all right, there we go.
Okay, so just in terms of a few things in terms of how I prepare to take photos, there's a few things. So the one thing that I that really grinds my gears is to get out in the field and have someone who's leading a workshop. And I've been on these tours before, with other people who are running workshops, and then have them say, "This isn't what I expected." If someone's paying you to run a workshop and lead and for your professionalism and guide, you should be prepared and you should know what the situation is before you get out in the field with a group of people following you around. So this also is a way of actually looking for inspiration in terms of just being prepared for what to expect when you get out in the field. So in terms of research before you leave the house, if I'm looking at inspiration online, I basically utilize Google to search for places that I want to travel and then look for things of interest. It could be festivals, it could be landmarks, it could be seasonal situational things where lakes that freeze over, or snow monkeys or lantern festivals in Thailand. Once I kind of like, work out what I am looking for, Google Maps to try and find out the logistics of how to get there. If you're looking for inspiration, Facebook groups and Instagram, YouTube, 500px, I think is still like, a good platform to look at photos and in terms of like, the possibilities, what's there. I think like, they all have means of actually like, piquing your interest and finding out what possibilities are out there to photograph. In terms of the apps that help planning shots, these can be used either preparing like, before you leave the house or when you're out in the field. So TPE, the photographer's eponymous, which is great for understanding like, sunrises, sunsets, moon positions for locations of where like I want to photograph. So that's
Is that
good to know.
is that one of the augmented reality ones where you can tilt it around and see?
I think you can do that, but like Sunseeker is the one that I use for sunrises and sunsets and moon for the AR. Photo Pills is another one, which is great for like planning for everything from the Milky Way to sun and moon positions. And Stellarium is the one that I use for tracking stars, and that's a good one for like AR. So they're great for actually like understanding, well, if a position is better for like sunrise, sunset, if it's a full moon, where would that be? Will the full moon then like basically be in a position where it lines up with the landmark, sort of like, for example, behind the Opera House or behind like some of the like landmark in the foreground. And then what elements are you looking for? Again, these are things which like I build my style of photography up with. So as I said, like I look for opportunities for color and vibrance. I like to make my images pop with vibrance, but I don't necessarily like oversaturated images. But in terms of like getting people's attention, like I do like to use color, shapes and form, like leading lines, the contrast that comes like from shapes and form, like when you create an image. It's just something which basically like with a camera in your hand, you basically like are looking for those opportunities to like to make something for someone to look at. Light.
Our eyes are drawn to color before shape anyway, right?
Yeah.
And then so it's they're kind of in the order that our attention is really drawn into an image.
Yep, absolutely. Light. So is there an opportunity to use like light like in the image towards making something unique? Is the light breaking through the crowd, like through clouds? Is it like dancing across like the water? Like these are the things which basically, through getting out there and observing, like am I looking for something which is different? And one of the images, like as part of the slide presentation, is in Japan. There's rice terraces called tonadas, and there is one part of the year in around about June, July, where the rice terraces are basically full of water. They're basically getting ready to put the rice plants into the water, but there is a period of time like through the year where the pools of water will perfectly reflect at sunset, and that one image of mine which I've taken, it took me about 18 months of planning and waiting for the right time of the year to make sure that.
Had you been there before? Had you been there before and you knew you were coming back? Okay.
No, and the thing is also like with that time of the year, it's hard for me to plan like around the rest of my schedule. So I basically like planned it for about 18 months. I went with some other photographers, like local photographers, which I've shot with before, and we basically got a group together and we drove like 6 hours out in the countryside. One of the guys managed to crash the car, and we were scrambling to like our sunset spot. But we did manage to get there, and we got the images, which are so rewarding when you've spent 18 months of planning to this shot in your head. It's just so fulfilling when that it actually all works out. The synergy. So a lot of the elements just combining the images together, into making a photo that works. So if it's, for example, if we're doing street photography, it's about finding the symmetry of sort of a street corner, which I like, and then waiting for a person of interest that comes into the shot and makes the image work. Snow monkeys, essentially, in Japan during winter, it's the elements of the water, the snow monkey, the mist, the rocks, making things work together, and then landscape photography, sunrises and sunsets with what elements in the foreground there might be blending in with the rest of the image of
telling more of the story of the location as opposed to just, oh, here's a pretty sunset.
Essentially these days, anyone with a mobile phone is a photographer. If you've got a camera, you have these opportunities to basically create something unique, something which is artistic, something which stands out. So you have these opportunities then to to utilize depth of field and the shutter speed and motion blur, and then if you want to, whatever images you capture on the field, and you can bring it back and then use editing software to stack images and then do star trails, and there is the opportunity to create something unique is just boundless. And that's my last point is looking for those unique opportunities.
Like you mentioned earlier with seasons.
Yeah.
That's something I hadn't even considered when shooting travel photography.
But that's the thing, in terms of
going or not.
Yeah, but so going all the way back to basically the first workshops that I've been on. One of the images in the presentation is the Petra at night. So basically, it's this. If Petra is if you've ever seen it, is this monument carved into the rock face, and it's 3 stories high. And every second night there is Petra at night, which is the whole courtyard. Essentially, you walk through the Sikh, and you basically walk through this canyon, and then basically at night it's just lit up with these candles, and it's just one of the most memorable experiences that you'll ever witness and see. And then I've done other sort of festivals around the world as well. So I've done Carnival in Cuba and the Lantern Festival in Thailand. But then these things are seasonal, and then if I go to Japan, there's basically over the 4 seasons, they have so many, it's so distinct in terms of what you'll be able to capture and see. So everyone talks about.
I think Japan's very blessed to have, like you said, very distinct seasons.
Yeah, I have so cherry blossom season it was the beginning of spring, and the cherry blossoms come out when it gets warm, and it just signals the end of winter, and it's just phenomenal. It is just one of the most breathtaking of natural events you'll ever see, and it happens basically over the whole countryside. And if you plan the trip right, you can basically follow the bloom from basically the south end back up to Tokyo and just see this wave of pink and color basically go through the country. So cool. If you plan it right. And
plan it right.
It is absolutely phenomenal. But then you've got you got summer, and they've got these Matsuri and Awadori festivals, and they've got these street carnivals, basically like every evening in every most sort of different parts of Tokyo at least, and they are just these festivals of just life where it's just singing and dancing, and I've been able to photograph those before as well, and they're absolutely phenomenal. They're one of the most fun events I've covered. Autumn is probably my favorite season in Japan because it's just so colourful. Being here in Australia, we don't really see the seasons change. So, over
Most
there,
countries are non-deciduous, so
yeah. But over there, it's just they go yellow, red, orange, and just explode with colour. And they've just, I have a goal to actually see the northeast corner of the US, hopefully when I get there during autumn. But in terms of sort of opportunities here and doing workshops, autumn is in Japan is phenomenal. And then there's winter, which is the first time I went to photograph in the snow in Japan. I will openly admit the thing is I did not know what the heck I was doing, because with my type of photography, I admit, I photograph in color and high vibrance, and then when you're photographing in snow, you strip away all the color. It's just white. Everything's white. So,
and if you're used to shooting a very bright, airy image, you just lose everything.
yeah, it is such a challenge. But then I learned how to photograph using shape and form and lines, and basically looking some of the landscape photography there. It's just up the north in Hokkaido is just so rewarding when you get to pull it off. And I love showing people these places which I know fairly well, and I've been there over several times over the years, and then showing it to people, and then them bringing those images home and entering their own local photography competitions, and even AIPP and winning awards with those images. I take pride in seeing those people's not only take those photos which they really enjoyed taking, but they love what they got out of it, and that to me is so rewarding.
That might be a good segue into the video that you've put together. I'm just going to bring that up now. I'll just pull your presentation off, and we'll just pull mine back up. All right. Did that work? Yeah, it did. Awesome. There we go. Wow. Wow, is all I can say. Got a few people in the comments. Amazing pictures or amazing pics. Yeah, I wish I'd shared that before we launched into the presentation, but that's all right.
It's all good. Like there are some of my most memorable photos. Like I look at those images and I know that they're moments in time which also I won't be able to get back to. Some of those things don't exist anymore. Some of those things,
unfortunately.
Yeah, like there's a tree in Hokkaido which I photographed at sunset, which isn't there anymore. And there are things which, like, I used to think that I could be anywhere in the world and home in a day, and that changed when I went to Cuba, and it took me 4 days to get there, and then it took me an absolute lifetime to get home as well. But so, like, those sort of things, like, are just tough on the body to actually keep doing.
Yeah.
But I've also, like, they've just been so worthwhile to actually do, to chase those photos.
I think we'll jump into, speaking of hard on the body, what gear are you shooting with at the moment? What are you carrying around? Well, not at the moment because of lockdown, but what's your go-to kit?
So I've been accumulating kit, like, during this lockdown. I've managed to get a hold of a Sony A1, an S3, and a 135mm prime. And that gear is been sitting and waiting around for me to get out and use. I haven't actually been buying too much other new gear. Like, I've pretty much got the whole spectrum of instances where I need gear, like, and I covered off. So I do believe that horses for courses, you do use specific camera gear for specific things. So obviously I'm not going to carry around a 100 to 400 in my bag all day if I'm photographing landscape, but then I'm not shooting a wide angle if I'm photographing snow monkeys jumping around everywhere. So I need
that makes sense.
I need to know, like, basically what my subject matter is. I usually do cover off all the bases if I can, like, I want to pack for a trip.
Yeah. Well, I'm really enjoying the new lenses that we announced a couple of months ago, the small compact primes. They've kind of replaced a few of the larger lenses in my bag.
Yeah, they look like good value.
They're really nice. This is just the 40mm f2.5. I'm loving this one at the moment. It's fantastic just because of the size and weight. We announced all three of these compact lenses, the 24, 40, and the 50, and they all have the exact same chassis. So they're all effectively the identical weight and form factor. So they're kind of just like, this one lives on my camera at the moment.
If someone had said to me, do I take one lens, one zoom lens that does 24 to 240, or do I take 2 primes for a trip? I would say take 2 primes.
Yeah.
But there is no such thing as one lens that is a Swiss Army knife that does everything well.
Yeah.
I've tried it, and I wasn't happy with my image quality and what I got out of it. So I would rather take 2 primes and switch between 2 fixed focal lengths, maybe a 35 and an 85, and that would work for me.
Do you find that having a smaller lens size is kind of more beneficial when you start shooting festivals or street, as opposed to, when it's shooting landscape, it doesn't really matter. The camera's on a tripod, you're not holding it. But when you're shooting, like you said, you're shooting a lot of festivals and unique opportunities, does it help having the smaller kind of form factor?
I think more so for street and city photography, because you don't want to be walking around with a massive lens, like, shoving that in people's faces, because if you're trying to get, like, candid street photography, the last thing you want to do is get noticed and look like, that you're out shooting big game out in the wild. Like, you will not. You want to basically, like, try and be, as inconspicuous and discreet as possible. And having a pancake lens, like, you know, on like prime, like, you know, on a like, you know, a camera body which is relatively, like, you know, small in form. Like, I'm just thinking the A7s are not, like, you know, massive cameras, but then, you know, even like, you know, the A6000 series, like, cameras, they're so so universal in what like, you know, the image quality out of the A6000 is fantastic as well. So I would rather, yeah, I would rather the small form of a pancake lens with a camera, like, you know, doing street photography. For carnivals, it's like, it depends. Like, you know, you would want to cover a range of photography, a range of, like, you know, focal length. So I'd probably, if I was doing festivals now, I'd probably take two cameras with, you know, one with a 24 to 70 probably, and maybe 135 mil to actually get those detailed shots that you want of people, like, you know, of interest to really get those details.
What do you have any like really specific features that you find that you rely upon when you're out shooting that, you know, come hand in hand with the Sony system?
So I do tend to bracket a lot of shots. It's just something which has always been ingrained in me from the beginning, is to always walk away from, like, you know, from a session of shooting with as much as you can possibly get. So if you are just taking the same static shot over and over again for, you know, for an hour of a sunrise or a sunset, and you're not changing any of the settings, then you're not giving yourself an opportunity to, you know, to get as much, like, you know, to look at and edit with. Like, you know, it can go from really flat light to blue light to gold light to red and yellow and whatever else. So I do like to basically bracket and, like, you know, and also, like, you know, always, you know, just be mindful of, like, you know, well, can I create something with slower shutter speeds or something more static, like, you know, like I'm shooting quicker.
More variation in the same scene.
Yeah. With the Sony cameras, especially with the A7s, it's essentially like, you know, the pixel shift. I can see the benefit in it. It's just finding those scenes which everything just doesn't move for, like, you know, for that period of time. Like, you know, I think the editing, like, you know, of those images, I think will improve, like, you know, through Adobe and through the Sony suite of, like, you know, whatever the software is that merges the pixel shift together. That, I think, is, like, you know, phenomenal in terms of, like, the possibilities.
For architecture, I think the pixel multi-shift is an amazing feature. Yeah. I'll let Nick just type that up in the comments and explain for anyone who doesn't know what that feature actually is. So it's available on the Alpha 7R Mark III and Alpha 7R Mark IV, and actually also the Alpha 1. But effectively, it uses a 4-pattern array of shifting the sensor around to increase the total resolution of your image.
What I haven't got to test, like, you know, basically with the A1, but I have previously with the A7R4, is the eye tracking. And in terms of eye tracking with wildlife, and Colby Brown, like, you know, one of the Sony artisans, put up an image, like, you know, during this week, where he was tracking basically a bald eagle, basically flying, like, you know, basically through his scene, and basically
like left to right, like straight across.
Yeah. But the wings are down, but the image is perfectly nailed on the eyeball of the eagle. And for that to basically, like, you know, to be pulled, like, to pull off that image and make it work and not get any motion blur, like, the image is pin sharp. It would have been moving so quickly, but there is just no blur in that image whatsoever. And the detail, like, you know, on the eye and, like, you know, the face details of the eagle, it's just phenomenal.
Yeah. One thing that I think is kind of overlooked a lot, especially when we have all these fantastic features like pixel multi-shoot, eye autofocus, 10-bit 422 video, things like that. The thing that really gets me is just the battery life. So since we started using the Z-type batteries, I found that I can go almost a full day of shooting on one battery. And also kind of tied into that is the USB charging. So I remember the days of if you forgot your charger brick that plugged into the wall, that was it. Game over. You forgot it. Go buy another one or buy another battery and then hope for the best if you're on the road. But now knowing that I can just plug the camera into my car or plug it into a phone charger means you can shoot all day, really. And on the Alpha 7C, the Z battery is rated at over 720 shots. So that's the best battery life for mirrorless on the market, which is whew.
So when Sony released the A7R, the original version, and the A6000, I crossed over from Canon, and I was basically I tested those batteries, the smaller batteries, to their limits. We're photographing in minus 21 conditions,
that would push any lithium-ion battery.
Yeah. So the thing is, I would have to be walking around with pockets full of batteries, basically at a time, and they would drain so quickly. But with these new Z batteries, there are big days when we're traveling in Jordan and Morocco, where we might not see somewhere to charge our batteries. So those Z batteries can last for days, which are absolutely amazing. And
that's pretty critical.
Yeah, I've now got half the amount of batteries I need to carry around in my bag, which is fantastic.
Yeah. We might just open up for some quick Q&A before I launch off with the quiz. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Andy and myself will be available to answer. I'll kind of handle the more technical stuff if it's about the gear with my colleague Nick. Otherwise, any creative career industry knowledge that you'd like to learn about, just feel free, ask away.
Cool.
Usually it takes a little second for questions to start rolling in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just because everyone will be watching about 3 seconds behind us.
Is usually everybody in the chat Sony?
Usually it can be a bit of a mix.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a bit awkward while we just wait for anyone to ask a question, but that's all right. Yeah, so I'll just touch on, while we wait, I'll just touch on what Nick's brought up in the comments there. Yeah, the Alpha 7R Mark III and Alpha 7R Mark IV would traditionally use a 4-pixel shift. So you're taking that huge 61 megapixel sensor and you're shifting it to get a super, super high resolution image. But then with the Alpha 7R4 and the Alpha 1, it goes up to 244 megapixels. So that's absolutely phenomenal. I know a lot of people that use the Alpha 7R Mark IV for archival work. So I know that the National Gallery uses them so they can scan documents because it's such high resolution.
I'm not known for doing a lot of video as well, but I just love the opportunity to, with the Sony cameras and be able to customize the button settings. You have the opportunity to just create so many different ways, and you do it also where down in camera off, I've seen some of your stuff on Instagram where essentially not only do you take the photos, but you also do the video,
it's juggling gear.
well, but the thing is, it's that opportunity to just create multimedia. Which
well,
is
even right now, I'm live streaming from the new ZV-E10 using the USB live stream function. So I don't have to use an app. I don't have to use any kind of third-party stuff. I just plug it in and it's running it all for me with eye autofocus, so I can move around, move in, move out. Yeah. So
yeah,
that's what I'm running at the moment.
I do need to set up a good home Zoom, sort of setup. Rachel,
fingers crossed, not for too long. Hopefully, I'd prefer to be back out running events, not not talking to a camera.
True.
Hmm. All right. Well, if no one's going to ask any questions, I might just bring up the next slide then. Add to stream. All right. So we have a quiz. So if you go to www.kahoot.it and use the following room code, everyone can jump in there and you should appear. We're having a little bit of quiz. There's only 7 questions, but the winner gets 20% off. Second place is 15% off. Third place is 10% off your next purchase at Rouse Hill Camera House. So it's hot contention here. We're going to battle it out. I'll just ask that when you do jump into Kahoot, if you could just use your first name and then your initial for last name, just so we know who you are, so that I can identify the winners a little bit easier.
For anyone who's watching, I just want to know, where is everyone excited to get to, when we return back to normal?
Yeah, if you just want to leave a comment, that way you can kind of respond to that. That will probably be a bit easier. I don't know why that's not working. I couldn't see anyone in there, but I'll I've just left a comment there just because this is my first time trying to run a Kahoot through a live stream and it's not playing nice. I've just left a comment down there for everyone. If you could use the room code 41500, that should put you in. Yeah, there we go. Sorry about that, Stuart. Yep, we've got 1 person in. There's 2. Thanks everyone for being so patient. This stuff, it's really difficult trying to run everything almost 3 seconds behind when I can see it. There we go. There's 3. There's 4 more people watching. Surely, come on, jump in. We've got 4. I feel so awkward just sitting here waiting.
Oh, good.
Yeah. While I'm just waiting for that to go in, you obviously spoke a lot about Japan, Andy. Is that the destination that you think you'll just keep going back to year in, year out? Or have you got some other things that are on your radar that are kind of drawing your attention after lockdown?
Right. So I do have opportunities next year to do a workshop in Antarctica,
Oh,
potentially.
wow. Okay.
So that'd be kind of cool. I've always wanted to go see Georgia, photograph the penguins there. I just need to figure out if that can fit in my schedule. But
How long
probably,
to go down there?
well, that's the thing. It's not just the amount of time you've got on the boat, but also like the logistics of getting all the way over to Argentina and back. But there are places which like I would like to go back and explore more of. So Iceland, I think, like I've been into Iceland during summer. What time of the year did you go?
uh, would have been around April. So
Right.
just coming
So was
out of
this
their
this?
winter.
But there was snow.
Yeah, there was still a lot of snow. I got
Yeah.
to walk on a glacier, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I'd love. So I've been to Iceland during summer, but I think I need to go back and see it during winter and just see, like, basically the how different it is at that time of the year. But also, I'm looking forward to exploring more of Morocco. Um, there are places which and Japan actually relates to this as well. There are just parts of, like, each country which I don't think have much photography showcasing how amazing they are. And Japan has so many incredible opportunities. They have an incredible uh, like in a sort of like community of photographers there. And the thing is, like, I've seen amazing photos from amateurs to professionals all throughout in Japan, and essentially not a lot of their images get shown outside of the Japan, outside of the community. So I think it's the same thing also, like, in some of those places. Maybe it's just because I'm in Australia on an island and we don't see those images as much. But I think Morocco, I think I'd like to get back and photograph a bit more and explore, and Iceland as well.
Yeah. All right. So we've got 6 people in at the moment. I think, is that working? Yes, it worked. We can see it. All right. I was so worried that this wouldn't work. All right. So I'll start the quiz in a quick second, and I might just full screen it so everyone can see. So we've got 6 people playing. All right. Is everyone ready? I'll assume so. And we will start. I didn't mention this one in the live stream, but we'll just have to wait and see if anyone's been paying attention to all the releases.
Quick, Google it.
I think I only did 15 seconds, which might not be enough to Google it.
Geez, I hope you're not testing me on these things.
Oh no, only one person actually played that one. And we'll click next. No points. True or false? This one I definitely mentioned, so we'll see. Oh, there we go. Oh, Luigi. All right. Good stuff. Good stuff all around. Up to 4 out of 7. Definitely mentioned this one as well. Easy peasy. Might make this one a little bit easier. I'll give you a hint. Oh. Just had a comment. My quiz is just running and timing out. Okay, that's a bit unfortunate. I'll figure out a way to kind of fix this issue after we finish the quiz. This one's a little bit of a tricky one, more technical, but it's very impressive. I'll leave it with that. And last question. And it was true, the Alpha 7C is a full frame camera despite its small size. If people's Kahoots were timing out, don't pay much attention to the podium. I'll work on a solution for everyone to kind of fix that issue. I'm very sorry though. I thought it would work. All right, I'll just pull that away from this stream. All right. I'll talk to Rouse Hill and see if we can come to some kind of solution. Unfortunately, obviously that didn't work, probably because of the time delay and people's internet connections might not always be able to keep up, but apologies for that. In summary though, I think the kind of the takeaway that I wanted to get from that was really that the E-mount system is really kind of, it's paired very well with travel photography. And that's something I found as I transitioned to starting to take more landscape, more astro, and more street photography. I found that all the little tiny little features that are buried in the menu somewhere, they're all kind of geared to just do the job that I need them to do and allow me to focus more on the actual photography or the creative side. Is that something that you found as well, Andy?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, I came over from a different camera system, and essentially like I'd moved off a bigger DSLR system because I was carrying around 18 kilos of camera gear in Cambodia, and it nearly killed me. Yeah. So when Sony released the mirrorless and like, you know, back in, I think it's 2015, 2014, 2015. I jumped on it, and basically you look at, like, you know, what the systems are doing now, and the lens ecosystem is huge.
Yeah, 65.
Yeah, there's so many options in terms of, like, you know, the lenses, and they suit, like, you know, every type of, like, you know, sort of budget type and like, you know, purpose. And I see that Michelle, like, you know, saying that your first camera was the A6500 with the 18 to 135. That would be my go-to recommendation for, like, anyone who's starting off and, you know, wants a camera which can take phenomenal shots, but is also, like, a quite good value, and has, like, you know, has this, like, you know, essentially the same capabilities as like, you know, any of the bigger cameras.
Yeah, very feature dense for the size of the in the APS-C range, I find.
Absolutely. I think, and being invested, like, you know, within the same, like, you know, ecosystem, it does make it easier to, like, you know, like, you know, go from one camera body to another. And the thing is, I do have essentially 5 different cameras, which they all, like, serve a purpose. So I still have an A6400, which basically I use for underwater, because it's like, you know, that in underwater housing is something, like, you know, that is a new challenge for me in terms of, like, you know, photographing a different genre of photography underwater.
Yeah,
Majority of my commercial work, which I do in Sydney, if I'm doing, like, you know, property design or, like, you know, commercial work in Sydney, essentially I use the A7 III, because a lot of the content ends up being online, and you don't need 60 megapixels for, like, you know, web content, essentially.
yeah,
I then have an A7R4, which I do use for predominantly the majority of my photography workshops and anything that ends up in print. And now that I've added, like, you know, 2 cameras this year in terms of the A7 S3 and the A1, I do, like, you know, have an interest in terms of, like, you know, developing uh, my portfolio of video and doing
yeah,
more, like, in a sort of multimedia. And the A1, it's just an amazing camera. Like, you know, I like that opportunity, like, you know, to basically, like, I'd never buy camera gear just for the sake of buying camera gear. It has
yeah,
to, like, you know, I have to see it, like, you know, an actual, you know, user case, in my sense, like, you know, will this actually help me improve my photography? And in most cases, I can work out, like, you know, yes, like, this is something which is going to make my life easier, or, you know, I can be more creative with what I do.
yeah. All right. Do you have any kind of last minute tips or tricks before we start to wrap up?
Um, Thank you for everyone who's, like, you know, dialed in tonight. Like, it's not exactly, like, you know, the easiest thing to be stuck on lockdown in Sydney. But
Definitely.
look, if anyone, like, you know, wants to reach out to me in terms of, like, any of the travel locations that I cover, or any of, like, you know, anything which we've discussed tonight, by all means, like, you know, reach out to me on Instagram or Facebook or email. Yeah, like, you know, do the research of, like, you know, where you want to go, like, you know, next. Like, my inspirations in terms of my photography, they don't necessarily come from photography. Like, you know, I I, I love looking for outside influences in terms of, like, you know, Anthony Bourdain, or, like, you know, or music, like, you know, from certain areas, or just things which come up randomly, like, you know, in articles I might read, or YouTube.
Hmm.
But essentially, like, you know, I use this time, like, you know, well, to actually, like, you know, sort of research and
Now is a
plan,
good
and, like,
time
you know,
to research and plan.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then, like, you know, basically, you know, when we get the opportunity to get back out there, the thing is, surround yourself with, like, you know, sort of these opportunities of, like, you know, community, like, you know, Rouse Hill does, like, you know, sort of, like, you know, events, like, you know, do more of those. Like, we just lost out on doing Vivid this year, so but, like,
Yeah.
look for, like, you know, sort of, like, you know, opportunities on, like, you know, Sony scene. Look through,
Mm.
like, you know, places which are going to be reopening up to us, like, sooner than later. So Japan, Hong Kong, Singapore, they're places which, like, I've photographed numerous times. New Zealand, it's amazing for landscape photography as well. Just look for those opportunities that, like, when you can get out there, just go.
Yeah. All right, I do have one more slide to bring up very quickly just at the end. As a thank you for everyone tuning in at home tonight and taking the time out of their day to come and listen to us, I will just bring this up. There we go. Yep, so as a thank you, anyone who attended tonight, you'll actually get 15% off your next, or up to 15% off your next Sony purchase at rousehillcamerahouse.com.au. So if you use that address and you use the link Sony15 Rouse Hill, you can get that kind of discount. So it does expire on the 19th though, so you've got a little bit of time to mull it over, but you can just see underneath that it's on those selected models there, which are a couple of the ones we've talked about tonight. Some excellent models in terms of keeping things light and simple. Quite a lot of primes in there. I know you said you're a big fan of primes as well, Andy. So am I. And once again, apologies for the Kahoot not quite going to plan. I will talk to Rouse Hill Camera House and organize something for everyone as a thank you. All right. I'll extend a really big thank you as well to you, Andy. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day as well to come and talk to me and share some of your wisdom and hopefully inspire a lot of the people tuning in at home. And another big thank you to Rouse Hill Camera House for organizing this. It's a really fun event. It's always lovely to chat with you, Andy, and catch up. But it's nice knowing that, we may have an end date for lockdown and there's a bit of a roadmap at the moment. So I think now's the time to start, like you said, start planning and thinking about the future.
Yeah. Thanks, Clyde.
All right, no problem. Thanks very much. We'll tune out.
Thanks, everyone.